listening to Vaughn Radio from the Federation of St. Kitts Nevis.
Good evening. Welcome to another edition of Your Voice with the NRP for July 11th, 2022. July 11th is a historic day in Nevis, and in Nevision history, it is on this day that Nevision-born American statesman Alexander Hamilton was gunned down in New Jersey by Aaron Burr. Very soon there'll be a political shout-out in St. Kitts and Nevis. The federal election is clearly upon us. We've got so much to talk about tonight, and our special guest is Dr. Patricia Bartlett, who's contesting Nevis 9 in the upcoming federal elections. We'll take our first break, and then we'll be right back with Your Voice with the NRP.
But the economy is broken, the government stick, and the opposition come and take a seat. The debt is high and employment's low, and it's the poor people who taking the blow. I say we tired, we need a revolution. We just can't depend on vaccination. I say we tired, time to pick myself off the floor. Just remember people matter more. So when you hear them talking bull on the radio, people used to matter more. Whether you red, blue, orange or yellow, people used to matter more. But when they needed us for last election, we were always the first option. But now they in and they comfortable. People don't matter no more. Boy, some people may not like this, but people used to matter more. RCCM them made a slogan out of it. People used to matter more.
And we're back after our first break of the evening on tonight's edition of Your Voice with the NRP. And in the hot seat tonight, Dr. Patricia Bartlett, contesting Nevis 9. Doc, it's been a while. What have you been up to?
Well, I've been putting in the work. Good evening to all of our listeners and our viewers, indeed. It's a pleasure to be in your company again, Steve. Thanks for the invitation to join you. Since I was last here, I've been very much taken up with canvassing. It's a lot of work. St. John's and St. Paul's now have been coalesced, and so I have to be going from door to door in the whole of Charlestown, and extending out to Hamilton and those areas, the surrounding areas. And of course, you know, St. John's in itself was already bigger than everybody else. And so it's a lot of work, but I'm putting in the work because I think it is necessary. I think we're at the point now that we must have a change in this country, because the way the track that we're on is not a good track for us, at least not for all of us. Maybe for some, a select few, but for the others of us, things are bad and likely to get worse. So I've been putting in the work.
Yes, and there has been a lot of speculation in the last couple of hours. Of course, the House was dissolved on May the 10th, giving 90 clear days before we must go to the polls. And around town today, there was lots of speculation. One person told me that it has to be today or tomorrow. Another person said Wednesday. At the hot bath this evening, one person told me Saturday is the magic day. You know how I feel about this whole business of having election dates in your back pocket and catching people with their pants down. I dare any politician in the Caribbean who wants to foster democracy to do like the United States has done and have fixed date elections. In fact, this was promised by the unity government, and yet we are in this glorious guessing game What does the Election Act of St. Kitts and Nevis say about when an election has to be called?
Well, as it relates to the period of time from the time the House was dissolved, we know that we have at least 90 days. A lot of people have been jumping around, shouting, demanding that it be called, at the earliest convenience. But the fact is, the Constitution says you have 90 days after it would have been dissolved. We know that definitely we're going to need, after the writ is being sent out from the Governor General, you have to have at least 7 clear days before nomination day. So the notice is, the writ comes out today, you have 7 days from clear days in order for you to have your nomination day. Once nomination day occurs, then you must have at least 7 clear days before the polling day. So those are the days that I think are the critical days. So it's left up to the Prime Minister. He could work back from August 8th. Mm-hmm. He could decide that he's going to have the election on August 8th and work backwards. And then that is the last day. Mm-hmm. That we think that we could possibly have, anything going on. So I don't know what the big fuss is. We've waited this long, and I'm quite prepared to just continue to do the work, because I know I have a lot of work to do. Mm-hmm. And so whenever it comes, we ought to be ready. And so we are readying ourselves for that. So I don't get involved in the speculation, because all that is, at this point, it's not going to, at least I don't think it's going to affect the price of sugar.
Okay. So we know it has to be held before August 8th, for sure. And of course, you have said every time you've been on this program that Nevis deserves better. The Observer has joined you this past weekend. Of course, last week in its editorial, it said that the Premier, your adversary in the upcoming elections, was modeling in serious times. A very telling article, putting on fancy suits or jackets, some of them with short pants, and saying that those are the outfits he will rock when he goes back to Church Street to try and get even with Timothy Harris. But of course, from the NRP standpoint, we see governance at a higher level. There's nothing jocular about it, because it impacts the 13 or so thousand persons who reside on this island. Politics is serious business. This week, as I said, the Observer agrees with you, and in its editorial it says Nevisians deserve better, and I want to share it. There isn't any way to sugarcoat it. Nevisians are at their wits' end with their current politicians. In short, they are fed up. And why not? The economy is in shambles. Too many people are unemployed. Taxes are excessive. The electricity rate has tripled, and of course water and food bills continue to climb. Add to this the fact that the roads are in a state of disrepair and government buildings are dilapidated. There is little wonder that a debilitating sense of hopelessness abounds. The actions of self-centered, narrow-minded elected representatives have created a precarious state of affairs. It really didn't have to be that way, but those given the opportunity by the people to manage their business have chosen instead to prioritize verbal abuse of Timothy Harris. They have used the attacks on Harris to mask their incompetence, but the superficial layers have peeled off and exposed the ineptitude. Talk has been cheap, and for years it has enabled ineffectual administration in Nevis. But as they say, the longest rope has its end. The people have recognized the deception, and this is as a result of the desperate circumstances they're experiencing. Earlier last month, Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge captured the essence of the problem: gross mismanagement. The questions she asked of the Nevis administration have unsurprisingly not been answered. There isn't any evidence of the 500 million from St. Kitts on the ground in Nevis. We have heard talk of a Ritz-Carlton for Nevis, and a Man Resort and a Windham Hotel, but nothing has materialized. It has just been talk. Couldn't the politicians have bargained for a public-private partnership using CBI promotions for these 3 hotels, as has been the case with other projects? The answer is simple. The elected officials represent themselves. They have no interest in prosperity of the people. We at the Observer have recognized, what we at the Observer have recognized is that the Harris bashing has lost its appeal. The facts and figures tell a dispiriting story about the disconnect between the politicians and the people. The situation can only be described as disgraceful. Divisions deserve better. And Dr. Bartlett, you've been saying that for months. I think the Observer is spot on.
And I don't think that that view is limited to myself and the Observer. That is something that I'm hearing reverberating throughout the land. Everywhere you go, people are in, and I think the Observer editorial really captured the essence of what is going on here. People are desperate, desperate to get out of the situation that they're in, that they somehow thought they should not be in. And they have a right, because everyone has expectations. We keep saying elections have consequences, but some people don't take it seriously enough. But I think now is a time that if we don't take it seriously enough, it would be even more detrimental than it has been up to this point in time. I was sharing with someone that prior to last year, 2021, I didn't really necessarily have any interest in getting involved in party politics, because I found from experience that party politics was a little bit too divisive for me. But after I saw where things were going, I couldn't help but, because there's some people like, well, everything, they're in a desperate situation, but they want to just sit back and just roll over. And I'm like, no. It is true that we're at a point where we didn't think that we would be, but the response cannot be for us to just capitulate. We can't just roll over and say, okay, well, Premier take win. We can't do that. It is too important, not only to this generation, but to the next, because we have some sustainable development objectives that must be met if we're going to have a sustainable society. And we are not on that road currently, but we need to get on that track. And we can only do so if we change course in the way we have been voting. Because for too long, and you see, you're talking about democracy. I don't know that we have enough guidelines. A man could just come and talk fancy, has no ideas, but he just talk fancy. And people are buying into this thing. To become a politician, you don't have to have any, or not necessarily have any special skills or qualifications. You just show up, you talk fancy, you make some empty promises. And that's one of the things I keep telling my constituents. I don't make promises. If I tell you something, it's going to be a commitment, but it's not necessarily going to be on an individual basis. Because I think that what we need to do as politicians is make sure that we craft policies and we put things in place so that everybody could benefit from whatever it is. At the end of the day, the goal, whatever goal is set, everybody in the society ought to be able to benefit from that. And so I hear the Observer. I have the same sentiment, the exact same sentiment. And I know that other people out there, we need a change. And if we don't get the change, I don't know what is going to become of us. And that is what I'm hearing from people on a daily basis. So I'm hoping that they would take this opportunity to take stock. Because just going along with a man who smiles with you, not even genuine, because after a while you recognize that it is not. The kind of things that we are seeing play out. And I think the Observer would have alluded to the fact that, people are pursuing their personal interests. And so going back to the fact that we need some criteria. And even if we don't have set criteria for politicians to qualify, because it's a right to everybody to, even to pick or choose whomever they want to. But I think that there should be something in the, maybe not the Constitution, but something in law that says that you must have an orientation period as a politician. Because the kind of decisions I see being made, and I'm like, okay, Jesus, if this guy only had a little experience, maybe in economics, maybe a little experience in integrity, because ethics and those kind of things, you can't assume that everyone comes to the table with those basic, and we have to, as it were, we have to try and protect the electorate from itself. Because, like I said, because a man could just talk fancy and you put him in there, at the end of the day, all of us gonna live with the consequences of him not being well trained for that, well suited for that position. And so I think that it is incumbent on us to, when we get into power, to make sure that we put those kind of laws to protect our, not only the integrity of the system, but to protect the people, because ultimately it's about the people. And so you see some people come and they do things and you're like, well, I thought that maybe he would have known better. And I'm seeing that a lot. And I keep making the same comment over and over, and people would think that I'm being repetitive, but it's because I keep seeing the same thing over and over. And I'm like, is there not someone in the room who is adult enough to say, come back? When people are spending without regards to the fact that you're putting us further and further in debt, and only 13,000 of us, well, you're being generous with the 13,000, I think it's less than that, but only a small group of us would have to repay that. And without any regards, it's almost as if we're just transitioning through. We make the decisions, we live high on the hog, and then the people at the end of the day are left with the struggles and the burden of paying back that money. That is not sustainable development. At least we have seen very little development under this current, NIA. And it is really deplorable. People deserve better. The long and the short is that Nivisions deserve better. And we should not be apologizing to these guys when they come. We should be flat out saying, look, I gave you the opportunity to serve. You have been disappointed. You have been disappointed in your non-performance. And so it is time for us to look elsewhere. Give somebody else a chance, someone who has fresh ideas, who have a vision to move the country forward, and not just the same style in you showing off this and showing off that. I just found that was so insensitive. A time when people are struggling to survive, and you think that it is appropriate for you to be flashing clothes that the average person can't afford. That is being insensitive, but that is still in keeping with what we have been seeing. That is what we have accepted. Some people would ask me, what are we balling for? We don't need to ball now. All we need to do is just accept that we made a mistake, correct it, and move on. Or else we would be repeating the same thing over and over again. That Nevis deserves better. But I'm hoping that we'll do something about it this time around.
Well, as the famous Calypsonian from Trinidad says in song, you get the government you deserve. And whenever the Prime Minister decides to ring the bell, it gives Nivisions, and of course Kittians as well, an opportunity to reset. I agree with you that this is one of the most important elections in our post-independent history. And I also agree with you and the Observer that we deserve better. Folks, we want you to join us. You could begin to call us now. The theme for tonight is We Deserve Better. One guy told me today that he can give me 100 reasons why we should be rid of this CCM administration and the 3 men who want to go back to Bastille. We may not get 100 reasons by telephone tonight, but we want to hear from you. We deserve better. Give us one reason when you call why we should do away with the CCM men in Bastille. Dr. Bartlett, one of the things the Observer mentioned is using the CBI program for development of projects on Nevis. We haven't heard any of that, but of course, last week we heard about the best-kept secret, Spencer Brand and hotel development. Of course, the CCM would hope that it would just go away. What are your thoughts on what we heard last week and the way things have played out since?
Steve, I was totally disappointed because I sit next to, right here on a different program, and I expected better. I really expected better. And at some point, I used to think that maybe that might have been the adult in the room at some point. I don't know. I just, had that level of confidence, in the individual so named. But, I know that our party leader had submitted a letter to the Integrity in Public Life Commission. And so that again was a second disappointment. It seems like all of the institutions are failing, or all of the units that are put in place, to make sure that we get good governance are failing us. And so I would think that just for their personal benefit, not that so their names don't get tarnished, I would hope that the commission, all the commissioners, all three of them, would just retire. Well, not retire, but resign. I can't imagine how you would accept the kind of limitations on a job such as that, knowing full well what it is. Because it's almost as if you have a dog, a German Shepherd, a big bad dog. It looks big and bad, but someone might have deliberately taken it to the dentist, the vet, and taken out all the teeth, and then put a muzzle over it. And you just see the dog in the yard with the muzzle over. You can't see that it doesn't have any teeth. You approach, the dog makes noise, but can't do anything else. I mean, I can't imagine that the Integrity in Public Life legislation would have been gutted to the extent that these guys can't even conduct an investigation. Because I know I've been asking, I was like, there's so much to investigate. How do you stimulate an investigation? It shouldn't have to come from someone opposite. I think that commission should be very active and always looking to see if there's any malfeasance in the system as it relates to public officials. And public officials don't necessarily mean just the politicians. So you have to be in tune with what is going on. You have to have time to dedicate towards it. I don't know if maybe, but when I heard that based on the response that they gave, that they're suggesting that they do not have the power to investigate, I was so disappointed. And I'm like, well, what is the purpose? You're just there just to accept a man decide to scribble whatever it is he wants on a piece of paper. How do you verify? It must take some level of investigation for you to at least verify the information that he's giving you. And very few realize that something is amiss. Then what? You just leave it because you're not charged with the responsibility of investigating. And so I don't understand how that works. I don't understand how that really could be a check and balance in the system. And so if I were on that panel of commissioners, I would resign. Because it looks bad. It doesn't, I can't imagine how. And the thing is, mind you, I know all three guys, and two of them I'm relatively close, to two of the gentlemen. And so I can't imagine why they would want to expose themselves to that, expose themselves for what? It's not the salary, it can't be the salary, because these are people who are comfortable enough. And maybe I'm being presumptuous, but I think they are. And so I can't imagine why they would, expose themselves to that, because I was embarrassed for them, and I would imagine that they had enough embarrassments for themselves. So I expect that going forward, that is something that must be looked into, because of course we have the parent Integrity in Public Life legislation at the federal level, and then you have ordinance in the smaller at the NIA level. And so it means that someone would have taken the original document and said, look, we don't want this down here to apply to us, or at least so it seemed to me. We don't want this to apply to us over here. But people not going to read it, so leave it there. And so I think this was strategic. I honestly believe that this was strategic, because now the things that we are hearing, how could you really say that you're representing people and allow all this to happen? But maybe we shouldn't be surprised. And the reason why I said that is because early on in this administration, I've been very uncomfortable, because I remember voting for my present representative in 2017, and by 2018 I had an issue. I had a big issue, because when I saw that priority was given to the purchase of a property that was supposed to be the Premier's residence, at the time people were struggling. People were already struggling. Nevis was already struggling, because if you look back at the budgets over the years, we've been in deficit budget even during Mr. Amri's time. So someone should have said, why are we taking the island into more extra debt just to establish a Premier's residence? Because it would not have been just purchasing the residence, it would have been maintenance, and he probably would have had a gardener, or and a maid and all that,
and a butler,
and it would have been at our expense, because the property, it would not have been his. And so I was at that point, I was like, no. And I remember coming on this radio station and making an issue of it, and then I was told later, well, my good friend Mr. Brand couldn't answer the question that night, because he claimed that he didn't know, because he was new in coming in and all that, and so it was deferred. At least his response was deferred until the following week. And when we came back, he said, well, it's not a big deal. It was the lands that we were really after, because we needed land for the cemetery. Huh? That is what was said then. To this day, not even an inch of land, not a square foot of land has been used by the cemetery. And what was peculiar about that acquisition as well was that it was done under the Premier's ministry. So why would the Premier's ministry, the question that has not been answered, why under the Premier's ministry you were purchasing lands for the cemetery, when that fell in the purview of the Ministry of Agriculture, because the Ministry of Agriculture is responsible for cemetery? And so why wasn't it done under the Nevis Housing and Land Development Corporation? Those questions were never well answered. And since then, because it was brought to light, they backed off. And so the property, I understand now, which I knew at the time was what the target was, it was the building and all the trappings, and that has been left there. No, just like a lot of other government buildings, just left the relic, just left there, and people go and vandalize. I understand those that been taken off, and people are going in because it's public property. And so I understand at some point a guard would have been stationed there, I guess, to protect the land, but the guard, since I would imagine, left, because I understand that people are moving in and moving stuff out, because it was in the day when it was occupied, it was a place that one would have felt honored to be invited to, because I would have been invited there because I was the vet. And so they've left that building now, just to rot, just like everything else that the steel buildings that are left here and there. And so all that, the collective assets that are just left to waste, all those things add up. And that's why we can't ever have an account for the 400 million. And obviously it has gone past that, because we've been saying 400 million since last year. And, they have been still receiving. The Prime Minister said it is up to 500 million now that has already come over to Nevis. I've not heard anyone rebut that. So I'm willing to work with what the official person said. If at the top he said he sent 500 million and there's no one downstream who is saying that they didn't receive it, then I'm working with the 500 million. So let us upgrade that argument, to include the extra 100 million, wherever it went, because we still don't see where the money going. And so I think we have a lot to account to our people for. I don't think that what has happened should have happened, and there's no excuse for not pursuing things like geothermal, things like the West Haven Marina, because all that was promised by the CCM. So if you recognize now that there's an accommodation in the CBI, because initially we used to hear, they just have these special projects that, could be done under the CBI. But after we learned, and it's just last week, because of this thing, that we were learning now, that there's an alternative investment option that paved the way for us to have gotten geothermal, for us to have gotten the saving in, for us to have gotten the road, the coastal road along the southern part of Nevis, going to the back of Brown Hill over there. And all of those things could have been done and not have to stress us in coming up with monies to pay for these things. And we still haven't seen any of these projects come to fruition. They have not even, at one point, the Premier is now blaming the Prime Minister, saying that he laid on his table, or well, let me not say laid it on his table, but he's saying that there's an approval letter that went to the Prime Minister for geothermal funding. He didn't tell us how much the funding was going to be, and he didn't tell us the terms, but apparently it was going to be a CDB, project. I assume that we would have to pay back. That would have been added to the portfolio of loans that we're already struggling to carry. And so I don't see any reason why, after they would have recognized for the benefit of Mr. Brand that they could use the alternative investment option to fund his project, why at that point you couldn't say, well, look, we promised Nivisions these projects, let us use this, because I thought that was an innovative way to go. And I see no reason why they would have taken the time that we sent them to Cabinet to represent one of their own, his special interests, and then the interests of Nivisions, as if we don't have any interest, as if they don't think that they owe us anything to go there and get anything passed on our behalf. You keep hearing the Prime Minister say, but the Premier never brought the matter of the fair share to Cabinet. I was like, really? So those are the things that have been happening. And I don't think that the level of maturity that we needed has ever been displayed from the onset. And so I was not necessarily surprised that we have gotten this bad, because it started bad. And I keep saying things that start bad morning can't come good evening. Because early on, even from the time back when we would have been choosing to get someone at the legal office, the Premier would have employed a friend of his from outside. Then I understand that that person was given a housing allowance. And then subsequent to that, I understand that the house that the person was occupying was the Premier's house. Now, how appropriate could that be? When that would have been one of the issues that they used to drag Dougie out of office, because apparently there was something with some Taiwanese story in St. Kitts, and that would have been one of the things. And the big cry by the elites at the time, the political elites at the time, was that we need good governance. This is the reason why we must change government, because Douglas is not cooperating, he's not behaving, and he's not confining, to the dictates of good governance, and that kind of language was used to get rid of Douglas. And then in the first opportunity, we saw something that my grandmother would say is just improper. The fancy people would say, impropriety started at that stage. And we have seen that grow. And I keep telling people, you can have a frog in water and you start just gradually increase the temperature and it could stay right there and cook. And that is what has happened to Nevis. We have seen this level of abuse of power, this level of lack of integrity, and we have just shrugged it off. We shrugged it off then we heard about this. It has been a scandal after scandal. And we've heard about junior ministers who have, in a ministry that does heavy work, purchasing their own machinery and went in time to government. Those kind of things. And people see these things, people talk about these things in hushed conversations. No one would call in, even under the anonymity of the calling programs. People are afraid to talk about these things. And I'm like, you have an issue. Don't put Patricia Bartlett out there to make all of the sacrifices. I don't mind making the sacrifices, mind you, because I came with nothing, and when I leave, I would be taking nothing. And that is my attitude. That is my philosophy. There's some people who, whatever they have, they're going to guard that until the last day and somebody has used it. So I encourage people, when you see wrong, nip it in the bud. Say something. But we let that go. We see all these things. The Monday track can't finish. And then you hear people saying, well, the Monday track would never finish because there are other underlying issues that we don't even know about. When I'm hearing, if they were to complete the Monday track, to make it a stadium, then it means that somebody in the executive of CCM would not be able to rent us bleachers. That can't be right.
Hold your thought there. We've got a first caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Mr. Manners, good night.
Hi, good night.
Good night, Dr. Patricia Bartlett.
Good night.
And good night to all the listeners. Mr. Manners, you say call in and give one reason.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. Somebody who caring, somebody who got the feeling, especially for the nation. Somebody who put the nation first and not them friends first. You get that?
Yes, and even from your perch in the Emerald Isle, Montserrat, you get that sense.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember at the heart of the pandemic,
Yeah.
when people may worry about how they might get something to eat, but lobster was on grill.
Mm-hmm. Lobster was on grill. Where? in the villages here?
Let somebody else pick up. Let somebody else pick up and run with them.
I'm reading you loud and clear, sir.
Okay then.
Well, you're gone. that was a bit quick. So callers, listeners, Montserrat have set the ball rolling. Theme for our program tonight, we deserve better. When you call, give us at least one reason why we should be rid of these three CCM representatives. Pick it up there, Dr. Bartlett.
Yes, I was just remarking on the number of infringements we have seen along the way. The abuse of power. When the Premier is going to take unto himself a person who is not necessarily qualified for the position of advisor in the area in which she would have been taken, just because she's a candidate. That is an abuse of power. And at that time, I think I would have made a public appeal, what is the integrity in public life doing about something like that? And then I would have heard a response when the Premier could take unto himself whomever he wants. But look at how, look, the optics, man, the optics, and they seem not to care. All these infringements are occurring in broad daylight now,
And that is why he would not declare that candidate until the election is called. Because he's going under the guise that person is an advisor, which every person in Nevis knows goes beyond that.
Right, and it is obvious, we all know that, and they continue to do it anyway, because as far as it's concerned, and they've said it, and people are going to still vote for us. I've been hearing that, and I'm like, we are 98% literate, and I wouldn't stop reminding our people that we need to start acting at the same level at which, we have been placed. Let it not be said that we were not well placed. If we are 98% literate, we have to conduct our business as if we are. And to allow these things to happen without even a murmur, a public murmur. Because the thing is, it is one thing to say it at home, but come in the public and rebuke these things, or else they're going to continue. And that is the issue that I think that we face now, that when it first happened, we never really did anything about it, and now it is just escalating. So you give a man a yard, and at this point now, these guys are taking miles. They're just taking miles, like they're racking up miles, like people rack up frequent flyer miles. These guys are not holding back. I'm hearing this, people complaining, contractors complain, and I have to ask sometimes just to probe, just to make sure that the information I'm getting is reliable enough information to mention it in public. and not get egg on my face. And I've had a conversation with a contractor, and he said, I'm not asking you, I am telling you that this is how this particular minister operates. You must get 10%. And I was like, really? And I didn't want to believe. And after a while, I was nudged into accepting that is the way things are being done. And these stories are not stories that divisions necessarily keep to themselves. They fly around, but they're not going to come and rage with them. They're not going to come out and condemn what is going on. But we share these stories. Yeah. And sometimes you have a little clique of people over here, and the stories are being circulated here, and one person from that group takes it over there. So most of Nevis would be well aware as to the kind of underhanding things that have been going on. And I remember going on Tell Me on a program on a different station, and I remember not wanting to label anybody as being corrupt, because that is strong language. It is extremely strong language. But I've gotten to the point now that I cannot but say that it is corrupt. We have a corrupt administration dealing with the affairs of the people of Nevis. And it is not fair, because too many people are struggling. Too many people are struggling. Why should we be struggling to get geothermal or any alternative renewable energy source at this point in time? We are way ahead of the game. We're way ahead of the game. But we had no representation in Bastia. We had no representation on that issue. Because if we had representation, we would have, by now, we could have been selling energy to St. Kitts before they even thought it was necessary to get their own solar farm. And I hear the Premier now saying, oh, we were at this stage. Well, if we were at this stage, why didn't you push it through? Keep telling people that, and I have read a couple of times when he would have made the statement that the finances were secured for this project. And he kept repeating himself, and I'm like, wasn't that I thought, and I'm mixing up articles now, and I realized it wasn't me. The fault was not mine. That is how he operated. He's promising you that something is definitely here, and the level of conviction in the presentation, sometimes you can't but believe the man. If you didn't live in Nevis, you wouldn't believe that the roads in Nevis, particularly in the Maid Road, how bad they were. You would think, because you keep hearing, oh, well, we've been doing roads all over. And then I try to drive my car, and on the main road, mind you, and I drop off over at Cliff Dwellers. And when I said I drop off, it was something that you could actually feel when you drop off of a well-paved road onto the bad road, and it continued throughout. And I'm like, this is what we get in? This is the level of representation that we get in. When I passed by the, what do you call it over there? The airport, the Vance Army Airport. I'm like, really?
You wasn't sure it's an airport?
But it doesn't look as if, there weren't any planes for sure to indicate, and then just the way the place is being not kept. I was embarrassed, and then I saw someone put up a post, that they showed the condition of the taxi stand that was there. I'm like, even if you're not using it, man, the optics, that is where you enter into Nevis, the few people who come through that route. And I can't imagine how in good conscience the Premier could come back to the people of Nevis and say, send me back to Bastia. And I'm like, send you back to Bastia for what? Having not convinced people that the reason why he wanted to go back to Bastia would have been to get fair share for them, because we now recognize that nobody ever did.
We've got another caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Hey, couple of questions. I've been hearing, of course, all my life coming up that Nevis is the queen of the Caribbean. Nevis is paradise. And probably about 30 years ago, I heard that we had 98% literacy, about 98% literacy rate. Does that 98% still hold firm today? Or do things change in time regarding our literacy rate? 98% is very, very high. I want to know if it's still 90%. How would we find out if it's still 90%? Any way we could go about that?
Pat?
Well, usually what happens is that once you have data for a particular country, the data that is published stays until you have fresh data. And I don't know that anything within recent times has come out to indicate that we have lost ground or we have gained ground. Who knows? We may be at 100% literacy now, but you have to look at what the criteria is to make that level, because if it is just a matter that you could read and you could write, then maybe, but as it relates to critical thinking, I don't think that is captured when you're making that assessment.
So in 30 years' time, you think we could take a look at it again and find out how, it is today?
Well, maybe that is not a metric that we necessarily have to pay too much attention to. Maybe we really need to find out how many of us at the level of critical thinking. Because what came out, UNICEF had made published a report within recent times, I think was last month, and in it they were making the case that because of the loss that the kids would have gone through for COVID for the 2 years, that has set us back. A 10 years period, and that is kind of, they were saying that a lot of kids cannot comprehend. They could read it, but they cannot comprehend what they read. So that is an issue. You could read something, but if you don't understand it, then what is the purpose of learning to read if you cannot process it? So I think that maybe we may have to ask, for a different metric to be taken as it relates to our level of educational achievement.
Because we seem to be touting that quite a lot. And another thing, about 3 to 4 weeks ago, I heard about this Spencer Brand situation. I'd like to know, what has Mr. Spencer Brand done for him to be asked to resign? What has Mr. Spencer Brand done for him to be being dragged through a system to seem to think that he has committed a crime, that he has done anything? Just tell us, what has he done? We are calling for his resignation, but what has he done for him to resign?
Oh, not me. Sorry. I thought you finished.
Are you finished, caller?
Yeah,
okay.
Well, I personally, I don't necessarily want to, in a public place, not agree with my party leader. I support my party leader, but I would have included the Premier and whomever would have taken the proposal forward. I started by saying that sometimes we elect people, but they're not necessarily people who have the experience in the system. Somebody in there should have known better. Somebody in there, and I think it should fall square on the shoulders of the Premier, because he's the leader. He is the spokesperson. He should have recognized that this is going to not play out so well. This is not the best thing to do. This is not the best course of action, because when you go into government, you don't go into government necessarily to push your agenda. You must be pushing the people's agenda. So to have a minister, the business of a minister taken forward by the Premier, I think is the Premier that really, his actions, I think that is where, personally, if I had to do it, I would have called for the resignation of the Premier, because he should have known better. That is false smack in the face of what you call corruption. That is what I would call as corruption. I'm not saying that Spencer Brand is a corrupt person. I just think that, the circumstances as they played out got him at a place where he had a project to put forward that he started, but someone with good sense should have said, this is not an ethical thing to do. At this point, hold off on this, and maybe we can advance it at some point when it doesn't seem as if there is conflict of interest. And so I'm not labeling him. He's my, my partner, sits right next to me when we're on the show. I have respect for him, but like I said, in this instance, I would have been asking for the resignation of the Premier.
Okay, well, I don't know not for the Premier, but Mr. Brand, if your body language...
Did you hold it there, caller? Did you say you don't know anything about the Premier? He's the Premier of all of us.
I'm not talking about the Premier.
Oh, okay.
I'm not talking about in this instance. I'm talking about Mr. Spencer Brand.
Yes, okay.
Should he have forfeited his 5 acres of land, turned down the CBI investment? I mean, it's not cash you're getting passports, as far as I could understand, to sell to companies to make up for the money. Should he have turned it down? Well, we are talking about Nevis want a hotel. You haven't gotten a hotel in 50 years, and Nivision on the brink of getting a hotel haven't done anything illegal aside. He hasn't stolen the land, has bought the land long before he got in the government. And he should throw it down, throw it away, and say, well, is this unethical or something of that nature?
The timing is bad.
Caller, you did say, though, that on the brink. I think the minister said when he came to the media that he hadn't sold any of the shares of the units.
Well, if he hasn't had, he knows more than me. That means to say he hasn't gotten any funding as far as that is concerned.
But it's the access.
He needs to done away with the 5 acres of land or crab the entire project.
No, but he could very well vest it over to his wife, because I understand that he's not the only individual involved. So the thing is, in some jurisdictions, when you get to this level and you're involved in private enterprise, you have to put whatever assets you have in trust, and so the trust does whatever it is, and you're not directly involved with it. So if issues come to the cabinet related to the trust, you're absolved from that. It does not. The appearance of impropriety is obvious to me, even though he is a good friend of mine. Well, let me not say a good friend, but we are colleagues, sit around the same table. So I like I said, I would not take him to the Integrity in Public Life Commission. Personally, I would not have done that. That I would have taken the Premier, because he's the one who advanced the...
Oh, okay, thank you very much. At least I'm a little more informed now and understand what you're coming from. Thank you so very much.
Okay, now I think we've got another caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP. I think we lost our caller. Oh, I think the caller is still there. Good evening, caller. I think we're having a little bit of a technical issue there. Dr. Bartlett, a very good case in point is a Premier who has said many times on this show and in other shows, we've got the caller back. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Good evening, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
You have a device on. Could you turn it down or move away from it, please?
Okay.
It's clearer.
I'd like to do a couple of things. I'd like to draw on my memory, my vague memory of the late Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw. If I'm not mistaken, there's a gentleman who was in cabinet whose last name was DeGrasse.
Sandy Pointer, yeah.
And Mr. DeGrasse, if I recall correctly, got involved in some conflict of interest issues.
Could you be more specific? It had to do with boats, having a boat, a private vessel to do the ferry run between St. Kitts and Nevis.
Something of that nature, yes. Yes. And Mr. Bradshaw lost no time to dismiss him from his cabinet. Lost no time, because Mr. Bradshaw, you say what you want about it, the man was of very high integrity. And he would not have had someone around him and that close in his cabinet who was involved in anything that's conflicting. Now, fast forward. Our present Premier has probably encouraged and no doubt tolerated this issue with his cabinet colleague. And if the gentleman claims that the project was initiated before he got into office, then as your guest said, Dr. Bartley said, it should be not only in a trust, but it should be in what you call a blind trust. A blind trust is in the way where he has no control, absolutely no control. You will see periodic reports, but he has no control over the operations of that trust. And I don't know if Mr. Brand is aware, but there's sufficient advisors, if he needed advice, who could direct him in that direction. It's clear that he wanted to get into office to satisfy his own personal needs. And yes, I would join the line of people who are calling for Mr. Brand's immediate resignation. There will be no question. The conflict of interest, and he knew it was a conflict of interest, and he should not be holding both issues at the same time. work on your personal business, and get out of government, or stay in government and get rid of your personal business. You know, you can't hold fire and water at the same time. Thank you.
Okay, caller, thank you. I was making the point that the Premier himself has made it plain on many occasions here in the Parliament that when he got into office, he sort of divested himself of Daniel Brantley and Associates. And I could remember when people asked about the Nevlec retainer, he would say that that was before, and that we were retained because we were the best legal firm available. But he has made some attempts to distance himself between himself and his legal firm. So it's difficult to understand how people feel that you should hold fire and water. We've got another caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Any one of you remember the name Ivan de Grasse?
Yes, the previous caller mentioned that. Could you enlighten us some more?
Oh, okay. My understanding is that he brought in a ferry to run in direct conflict with the ferry that the government was operating at the time, and the Honorable Robert Llewellyn Bratcher fired him. That's my understanding of the story.
Yes,
because it was a direct conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't attest to what is being said about the Honorable Spencer Brand, but if it is true, it is a direct conflict of interest. You don't go into government to feather your own nest. You go in to serve the people. Good night.
Good night.
If it is true what they're saying.
Good night. In fact, those of you wishing to learn more about Ivan de Grasse, Robert Bratcher, and the firing for bringing in a fast ferry, you could go to Glenroy Blanchett's book, The Life and Times of Robert Llewellyn Bratcher. Very interesting times.
But you know, Steve, that is the culture.
Mm-hmm.
That is the culture that we've seen develop, you know, and nurtured under this present administration. Everybody's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine that my boy thought, well, you know, everybody else doing it and nobody saying nothing, so I could do it too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But still, mind you, I'm not saying that he's right to try to pressure anybody. I don't know that any pressure was brought to bear on the people who took it to cabinet, but it couldn't get to cabinet by him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm like, you cannot not hold the others responsible. You can't have a crime that is the person who say, you do it.
Mm-hmm.
You punish the person who say, you go forward and steal something. And the person who actually did the stealing just walks scot-free. That's not the way it works. That's not the way it works. That is not justice.
Mm-hmm.
That is not even street justice. And so I'm saying that this level of corruption has gotten to the height that it has gotten because it has been nurtured. It is something that almost every one of them you could point and say, this is an instance when they did not demonstrate good judgment. And it is not even borderline corruption. Like I said, I used to think that this word was so harsh, but I just have to accept that that's what it is.
You know, I chuckle. Oh, we've got another caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Good evening, Mr. Manners.
Hi, good evening.
Just today, I heard someone raise the question: why is it when system administrations are in office, they are charged with such grave issues of corruption? We have not heard an NRP administration being charged with that level of corruption, as a matter of fact, with any corruption for that matter. I recall a government minister in the previous system administration, now deceased, and an individual who held a very high position in government, co-signed a transaction at a bank in Nevis to transfer $300,000 to an individual in Jamaica. When attempts were made to ascertain the disbursement of those funds in Nevis, I learned that the Jamaican bar said they couldn't release the information, and it was good knowledge that those monies were redirected here, and politicians in the previous system administration benefited from it. The other issue that became very popular was the transfer of a significant parcel of land to a given family. And when investigations were done, it was revealed that the land was sold at cents per acre, less than $1 per acre, to that given family. And then that land was subsequently sold for price beyond market value. Hence, the large amount of money ended up in the hands and pockets of that family. The system administration always seemed to be their culture. Corruption seemed to be their culture. And I just want my fellow Nevisians to understand, if Nevis is to progress, we cannot think of getting any level of progress from a system administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Bartlett, I chuckled on 2 consecutive Tuesday nights when Minister Brand said that his party would wrap this double salary thing around NRP's neck. Nobody thought that there might be an albatross somewhere lurking, like a necklace. Not saying that it is, but of course, were it not for a revelation from across the waters, we would have never known of this. The Premier has been very proud and has boasted not only here in the Island Assembly, in the National Assembly. He always felt that he had a leg up on the federal government because they had legislation over there as well, but had not operationalized it. People are beginning to think whether the Integrity in Public Life Commission is all about people mounting the steps once per year with a brown envelope, and the nation doesn't even know if there's anything in there. That is what it seemed to have been reduced to. Could it be that we were given a paper toothless tiger? Bastille Pandey in Trinidad and Tobago introduced Integrity in Public Life legislation in 2004. He was the first person who got caught in it. And as recently as last week, I heard a story involving his wife. His wife is still being questioned in that particular matter. That seems to be legislation which works for the people. This doesn't seem to do for the people of Nevis.
Yeah, a lot of things we just do them because it would look good and it would sound good, because I've heard, the Premier boasting, oh, well, we have introduced integrity in public life, and we have the commission in place and we're doing this and we're doing that, only to find out now that, like you rightly said and characterized the situation that we're in, is that we have a toothless dog. We have to do better than that. We have to do better than that. But you see, the people, we are the one at the end of the day ought to be the arbiters. We had to be able to look at the situation and say, this is not what we want. We're going to judge you. We're going to vote against you. Simple. Do not continue to accept this level of behavior, because it just gets worse. Because a man is he gets one term as establishing himself, and in the second term, it has been ruthless, because man knows that he has already secured for himself a pension that you and I are going to have to pay for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. And so whatever he does after the first term, if you do not check him then, the country is in trouble. You're in jeopardy when you do that. And I remember making the call, I said we have to be careful. We have to be careful who we're sending out there to represent us. You hear the guys boasting that they can do this and they can do that, and I'm like, come on, let us be reasonable. Especially as it relates, and I understand now that because they want to get the heat of the $44 million saga off of the backs, they're going around saying, oh, don't send those people to syndicates because they said they don't want their portfolio. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's why we have to educate these guys, because someone in public life sometimes have no idea what is going on in private life and vice versa. And it seems to me that these people who we are picking from the private enterprises and thinking that they're suitable to run government. Government is a different kettle of fish. You don't come in there and your mind set on all these dealings, wheeling and dealings. And once you have someone already entrenched in that kind of behavior, it is difficult. And you have to be mindful of it, and you have to watch them carefully. So when you see the first inkling that they're moving towards there, the first opportunity you get, you need to remove them from office. Do not give anybody 2 terms unless they deserve the first one. And what has been happening around here is like they're telling you, oh, well, one good term deserves another. But you didn't perform on the first term. And you're asking people to like you. And that is what it is. These guys are likable guys, because they say the right things. They go around and they touch everybody, and then people vote for them. They're fooled.
We've got another caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Mr. Manners,
Hi, good evening.
one of the reasons you want your own leader that cool, calm, and quiet like that
Janice.
Daniel,
Mm-hmm.
and you really want one leader that come and boast and brag that can buy watch and buy clothes, buy own clothes and so. Question to you, Mr. Manners. For somebody that buy them watch and then clothes and so, what benefit that they be to you?
That's a rhetorical question. The nation knows the answer. It doesn't impact
then.
lives and livelihoods.
Okay then.
Thank you very much. 22 minutes to 10. A previous caller, we've got another caller, so we'll go back to the lines. No, we have lost that caller. Now, a previous caller spoke about 98% literacy. There's a friend of mine in another CARICOM country. Ever since the story broke how our 3 Nivision politicians mashed up our whole government, he said he'll be following this saga to its end. And he is waiting to see if the people in Nevis will send back to St. Kitts fellas who mashed up a government, who didn't even understand that a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. People around the region are watching and listening. Nevisians, the day of reckoning is at hand. 21 minutes to 10, we'll take a break, and then we come back. Dr. Bartlett, you've got some other matters to deal with.
Your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
20 minutes is all the time we've got, and there is somebody hot on the line. We've lost that caller. Please call back. We daily want to hear from you. Remember the theme for tonight's program, We Deserve Better. When you call, give us at least one reason why we should be rid of Brantley, Jeffers, and Evelyn. Call us 469-1616, 469-1700. While we wait that caller, Dr. Bartlett, you wanted to switch gears.
Well, switch gears, but still, on the same lane. As it relates
the
to
caller
us,
is back. Hold it there. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Could you announce the overseas number? Someone just called me asking for the overseas number. I didn't know it.
The technician says there is no overseas number. It's 469-1616, 469-1700. Those two serve everybody, whether they're here or in the diaspora.
So there's no overseas number. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks.
Okay, Dr. Bartlett.
Yeah, as you're saying that Nivisions deserve better, and indeed we do. One of the things I've been met with or presented with, a dilemma that I think our island is experiencing, as it relates to how we navigate around the issue of the CARICOM single market and economy, because people have been complaining that the foreigners are getting everything. And for some reason, we seem not to understand that we're in a space now where not by virtue of your birth are you entitled to many things more than anybody else as a CARICOM citizen, really. We have signed on to all these agreements, and sometimes I don't find that the consultation that is necessary to be had with our people, that step is being taken. And so a lot of our people have gaps in the knowledge as to how things should work. And we think that we have an entitlement because we were born here. And it doesn't work that way. And so the issue of foreigners appearing to be able to take things, it's not their fault, because they have an advantage on us. And that's why I say, and I would propose that when we get to the federal government, that we make sure that we have skills training academy, or whatever you want to call them, established on Nevis at the expense of the federal government, because they owe us that much. Our people are being asked to compete for jobs that they have not had the requisite skills training for, and it is unfair, because we have people who are coming here, and if they come and they have a skills training
Hold it there, we've got another caller on the line. It's a busy evening. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP. Hello, caller.
What about that?
Could you raise your voice, please?
Good evening. Yeah, I'm listening up.
Yeah, caller.
You're
breaking up. I imagine you're using a cell phone. Could you seek some more clarity?
Okay.
All right. Go ahead. Could you raise your voice, caller?
Hello?
Hi, good evening. We're hearing you now.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead. Go right ahead.
That, it seems to me that the politicians of them only go into office to make a statement and get contribution for them and the family. All those ministers who have done the wrong with this $400 million, they should retire. They should retire. They should go away from the people. Give the people a break. Are you killing the country? Are you killing the nation? The nation is more to mold. More to mold. And I believe that we as Nevisians and Kittitians should get very serious and move forward. Move forward. As a Bian, move forward. I would like to know what they are doing to get Nevis and St. Kitts together. Because we are not together. How we are going to move on? Mr. and Miss, they are serious. They get in there to get their personal gain. This is not a personal gain. You come to ask for people. You come and ask a question to say, I want to solve. And then you get in there, you want to do what you like. You people give you power to run your affairs of the country. And then what? What you intend to do? You can't show me what you do in Gingerland. There is a gentleman who was running Gingerland from 1989 that could go back to his history. Honorable Vance Amway from 1987. And up to now, he can't leave a legacy for what he has done in Gingerland. And you can bring somebody else to run in Gingerland and leave nothing, just get a portion of money going home every month. This is, no, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, let us come to a grips and let us come to a serious conclusion. Politicians, those who are in office now, don't vex with me. Attacking my mind. I explained it myself to the country and the nation tonight. Lord, help us.
Thank you.
Help us.
Thank you.
Because one of these days we will overcome. We shall overcome. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Very impassioned caller. Pat, we haven't been here before. we've hit a roadblock, and I don't see us moving forward. We've got another caller. Good evening, caller. You're on.
Yeah, good night, sir.
Good night.
The question for Dr. Bartlett. Hello?
Yes, go right ahead, please. She's
I
listening.
listened to the party leader last night trying to address the party's stand on a coalition partner. She was not clear. So I want to ask Dr. Bartlett whether the NRP is still aligned with the Labour Party, the SKNLP, and also whether the allegation made by the system about the NRP being financed by Dr. Harris and the PLP, whether there's any truth in that. But in terms of a coalition partner, is the Labour Party still their coalition partner?
We don't, as far as I'm aware, the party philosophy does not include...
I listen up here.
Yeah, thank you, caller, for that.
Our philosophy doesn't go there. We do not have partners. We don't have permanent partners. We have affiliates when it is necessary for us to do so. Obviously, we could never form a federal government by ourselves. So if we were to get 3 seats in Nevis, we have to see who in St. Kitts that we can work with. My personal thing is, I don't know what the party leader had explained last night, but I know what she has been trying to convey to people is that we are not going to hitch our cart to any locomotive at this point in time. It makes no sense. Whatever the people in St. Kitts decide, we'll work with the people in St. Kitts. So if we would not try to frustrate the wishes of the people in St. Kitts. And so if we have an overwhelming number of people in St. Kitts who want to go one way, but they just want a little nudge from us in Nevis to go that way, provided we would be accommodated in our programs, we are well, placed, I think, to make a difference, then we would go that way. I think that, and I like things to be rational. I like to know that I have practical solutions to things. And I have said, if you have a 4-4 split in St. Kitts, well, now you have 3 parties in St. Kitts. But let's for some reason say that you have, 3-4 in one, and then the other 4 split on the other 2 sides. Obviously, the one that has 4, I would think, commands the majority of St. Kitts people in one block. And so I can't see how it would be reasonable to go against that 4, join with the other 4 that are in patches. I can't see that be a reasonable approach. In times gone when we just had 2 parties, it would have been easier too, to maneuver. Because for me, you have a 4-4 split in St. Kitts. At that, well, maybe I'm just arguing semantics now. Maybe it doesn't make any sense at this time because it is not that way. That the presentation is not like that. But I guess it is still likely you can come out with 4-4 in St. Kitts, even though you have 3 parties. You can have one party that just does not get any seat at the poll. That is maybe not likely, but let's say we work with that scenario. You have one party has 4, the other party has 4, the other one doesn't get any. We get 3, we get 2, whatever it is, balance of power. You decide the party that has the highest number of votes. I think that is a reasonable approach. And I think that is something that we should have in the Constitution as to the way forward, so people don't come around and frustrate the wishes of the majority. Because that can't be fair. That just because you have a friend in St. Kitts and CCM have already decided who the friends go be. Irrespective of what the people in St. Kitts need or want, you in Nevis determine that can't be fair. You go with who the majority of Kittitians decide that they want. And I think that is a fair way to look at it. In terms of addressing the foolishness that the Premier has been peddling, I don't know who still listens to the Premier and believes half of what he says. Because he's a man who will tell you something today, and then tomorrow you forgot that he tell you something, and it's a totally different story, and you're left to wonder which one of the stories he really wants you to leave with as being the truth of the matter. And so for him, what his strategy, and he's so obvious in his strategy, he wants to demonize Dr. Harris. And once he thought that he would have established that, succeeded in demonizing Dr. Harris, now you hitch on NRP, Dr. Harris skirt tail, and then you say, here, this is one block you need to discard. But it's not going to work, so it's not going to work that way. Because personally, I have not seen the monies that he's talking about maybe if I were party leader, I would go searching for that kind of money because we need help.
Maybe
Obviously need help.
maybe this caller would be a bearer of good news. That money come in.
Yeah, but he wants to make the funding of NRP an issue.
The caller is back. Good evening, caller. You're on Your Voice with the NRP.
Good evening, Mr. Manners.
Hi, good evening.
And good evening, Dr. Bartlett.
Good evening.
I can't lend my voice and say we deserve much, much better than what we are getting. But I want to make 2 points tonight. One, has anybody seriously looked into the amount of money that Minister Grant was looking to make from the CBI with 1,224 shares? As people actually look at it, multiply that by the 175,000 and see how much money he was looking for to do this project.
It's almost a quarter of the Harris jail, they say. If you do the maths,
I'm saying
it's almost a quarter.
I'm saying you needed $600 and something million to do this project. Okay, you didn't get the 600 and something million, but you accept 44 million? Oh, well, how in the world you can say you accept 44 million who can do the project that what you wanted to do for 600 and something million? And secondly, Spencer didn't take that to the cabinet in St. Kitts. I think that all 3 members in St. Kitts, well, ex-members in St. Kitts, should stay in Nevis because they are just as guilty as Spencer in taking that to cabinet, have voted for it, and at the end of the day, secrecy to all of Nevis people. We deserve better. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, that's a very interesting point. A couple of people have been asking me about that all weekend. Have we really considered the value of 1,224 shares? I'm not good at maths. I'm a liberal arts man. We've got another caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
I just want to address something that Dr. Bartlett said about the CARICOM, agreements and so on. And I know that Anguilla is not part of it, but I just want to relate an incident that took place. A division went down, was sent by a particular company to Anguilla to do some work down there. And the immigration officer, just an ordinary immigration officer, no senior person or anything like that, asked him, "What are you here for?" And he said, "I'm here to do some welding for da-da-da-da." And he said, "Sit down there." And he called the director or the manager of the company. He said, "Come pick him up," and so on. And when you finish, you bring him right back here because we have welders in Anguilla. Now, I understand that Anguilla is not part of it, but what I'm saying is that CARICOM agreements or not, governments can set certain things in motion to protect the interests of their people. And nobody going to tell me no. Nobody going to tell me no, because even if I have a doctorate and I go to Barbados and so on, and somebody up there with, comparable thing, they're not going to give that job to me. They're not going to give that job to me. And I understand that about these CARICOM agreements and so on, but no government, every government has a right to protect the interests of its people, every government, and nobody is going to tell me anything than that and so on. Whatever you need to do, you can set things in motion. You can say, well, we will allow in a certain number of people because, so what? You're going to fill the country with an influx of carpenters when we already have good carpenters here? No, I think measures can be put in place to protect the interests of the people of the land, because if we don't have rights here, where else will we go to get them? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Paula. We've got 4 minutes. Time flies when you're here, Dr. Bartlett. Feel free to use the remaining time, and if possible, we can squeeze in maybe one more call. We want to hear from you why we deserve better. Dr. Bartlett?
Excuse me. I'm so sorry that we didn't get enough time to get into the skills training that I was talking about, because the proposal I was trying to make is just that we need to get our people to on a plane that they can compete with others if we're going to open the floodgates. And basically what has happened is that our government has really opened the floodgates without preparing our people ahead of time. And so people are having a difficult time trying to understand why is it they cannot operate in this space in which they live with a little more dignity. And then the requirements for people come in. There are people who, if they have a skills national certificate, a CARICOM skill national certificate, then they can move and you can go to Guyana or wherever and be able to compete there. But we are not given the level of training, so we must be able to train our people, not only train them, but they must be certified. And then make sure that our people get license and stuff like that, so they can compete not just in St. Kitts Nevis, but they can move outside and be able to ply their trade elsewhere. Because it is just, people keep saying that it is a global community. You know, and so we should not be confined just to St. Kitts Nevis, you know, within the borders here, when there are opportunities out there. So the issue of whether or not 1,200, you know, carpenters came here, if 1,200 carpenters are needed here, then they come. If they come here and they can't get work, they'll move on to some places that the opportunities exist. And so right now we have opportunities in Guyana that most of us are not qualified for. And one of the things, as I move around, the observation that is being made time and time again, and most of the times by people who are non-nationals, is that, but you all don't have any training centers here, because in almost all other jurisdictions within the CARICOM grouping, there are skills training, you know, centers that people can get to that level of competitiveness that I've spoken about. And we are, I think, retarding, you know, the progress of our people when we do that. And I don't think that that is a right thing to do. And I think it's about time that we change that dynamic. It's about time that we really put some thought into how is it we're going to get our people prepared to weather the storms that are coming. Because jobs are getting scarcer and scarcer, and we need to get to the point where Nivisians don't feel like they're alienated in their own country, and that is what is happening. And so we're going to have to make provisions for skills training, certification, and licensing for our people. And I think that that is something that the government, the federal government, has a responsibility for. And I think that they ought to honor that, and I think that it ought to be policy going forward. And I think that that is one of the things that I personally want to agitate for, to make sure that our people are well placed and they could, you know, compete with anybody else. We don't have a lot of time left, so what I would like to do though is just to remind our people to get ready. Too many people are not engaged yet at the level that they ought to be, and you'd hear, well, maybe make up my mind yet. You need to understand what the issues are, understand the implications of this particular election on going forward, because if we don't get it right, if we have the same people going back to Bastia on the same mission that is not clear, we are not likely to get any better result coming back to Nevis. The issue of accountability, we must apply that measure. We must apply the measure of accountability to all of our public servants, and particularly the people who are in leadership position, because whatever they do is being mirrored further down, you know. And so we must be able to set good examples and be guided accordingly. You can't be telling the people downstream to act a certain way as it relates to their decorum and integrity when you're at the top doing things that are not in keeping with that. So I want people to engage on the issues, continue. I'm not going to say to ignore the noise. Listen to the noise, but put on your filters. Make sure that what you're consuming makes sense. Don't just listen to people curse. That might be good entertainment, but at the end of the day, it's not going to impact on you positively. People are saying send them back to Bastia so that they can get Nevis's fair share. Ask them, what is it you're going to do differently when you go this time to make sure that you secure fair share for the people of Nevis? Because that is an issue that has eluded them for the longest while, and I don't see going back without a plan is going to help us in the long run. Good night and God bless.
Thank you. It's 10 seconds to 10. The clock is ticking and the day of reckoning is getting close. We want to make Nevis nice again. Change must come. This has been your voice with the NRP for Monday, July 11th, 2022. Good night.
Your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcast